Today we're looking at some of the most terrifying natural phenomena ever witnessed on Earth. Number 10. Ball lightning. Imagine you're sitting inside your house during a thunderstorm. The rain is hammering against the windows. Lightning flashes outside. Everything seems normal. Then a glowing orb suddenly floats through your wall. Not the window, not the door, the wall. At that point, you're no longer dealing with weather. You're dealing with a side quest from a horror game. Ball lightning is one of the rarest and most mysterious phenomena ever reported. Witnesses describe glowing spheres ranging from the size of a golf ball to the size of a beach ball. Some float silently through the air. Others move through buildings. A few have even been reported passing through closed windows before exploding moments later. And here's the terrifying part. Scientists still aren't entirely sure what causes them. Imagine being chased by something that science itself is struggling to explain. Thankfully, they're extremely rare. Because if glowing lightning ghosts became a common occurrence, nobody would ever leave their house again. Number 9. Fire whirls. Most people know what a tornado looks like. Most people know what a wildfire looks like. Now imagine those two disasters deciding to work together. A fire whirl forms when intense heat causes rising air to begin rotating. The result is essentially a tornado made entirely of fire. And no, that's not an exaggeration. Entire columns of flames can reach hundreds of feet into the sky while spinning fast enough to rip apart trees, buildings, and anything unfortunate enough to be nearby. During the 1923 Great Kanto earthquake in Japan, one massive fire whirl reportedly killed tens of thousands of people in a matter of minutes. Think about that. Nature looked at a city that was already dealing with an earthquake and said, "You know what this situation needs? A flaming tornado." The temperatures inside some of these fire whirls become so extreme that metal can melt, trees explode, and the surrounding air becomes nearly impossible to breathe, which means if you ever see a tornado made of fire, don't stop to take a picture. Nature is already trying to remove you from the guest list. Number 8. Ice tsunamis. When most people hear the word tsunami, they imagine a giant wall of water, which is fair. That's normally how tsunamis work. But every now and then, nature likes to get creative. Instead of water, it uses ice. An ice tsunami occurs when powerful winds push enormous sheets of floating ice toward shore. At first, it doesn't look particularly dangerous. Just a frozen lake, a little windy, nothing to worry about. Then, the ice starts moving, slowly at first, then faster. And before long, thousands of tons of solid ice begin crawling across the landscape like some giant frozen monster. Trees snap, cars get crushed, buildings get shoved off their foundations. Entire neighborhoods can be buried beneath mountains of ice reaching several stories high. And the worst part? You can't stop it. You can't reason with it. You can't even really fight it. What exactly are you supposed to do? Punch a glacier? People have described the sound as a never-ending avalanche mixed with a freight train, a deep grinding roar that gets louder and louder as the frozen wall approaches. And if you're standing in its path, the only sensible option is to leave immediately. Number 7. Volcanic lightning. A volcanic eruption is already terrifying enough. You've got lava, ash clouds, flying rocks, poisonous gases. At this point, most natural disasters would call it a day, not volcanoes. Volcanoes like to add special effects. When enormous amounts of ash are blasted into the atmosphere, particles begin colliding with each other and building up electrical charges. Eventually, those charges become so powerful that lightning starts firing through the eruption cloud. The result looks less like weather and more like the final battle between ancient gods. Massive bolts of lightning flash through towering black clouds, while rivers of lava flow below. Entire skies light up purple, white, and blue. For a brief moment, Earth looks less like a planet and more like the apocalypse. The eruption of Eyjafjallajökull in Iceland produced some of the most famous images of volcanic lightning ever captured. And honestly, it looked like something a movie studio would reject for being too unrealistic, because nobody would believe nature could actually do that. But nature absolutely can. And every time it happens, it reminds us that volcanoes are not just mountains. They're giant cracks in Earth's crust that occasionally decide to throw electrical storms into the air for fun. Number 6. Rogue waves. For centuries, sailors told stories about enormous waves appearing out of nowhere. Not storms, not tsunamis, just single gigantic waves emerging from an otherwise normal ocean. And for a long time, people assumed they were exaggerating. Because sailors have a long history of seeing weird things, sometimes because they're tired, sometimes because they've been at sea for 6 months, and sometimes because they've consumed enough alcohol to start negotiating with seagulls. But then satellites started confirming the impossible. Rogue waves are real, very real. These monsters can rise over 100 feet into the air. That's taller than many apartment buildings. Imagine you're standing on the deck of a ship. The ocean around you looks normal. Then you glance toward the horizon, and suddenly there's a wall of water taller than a 10-story building charging directly at you. No warning, no time to prepare, no dramatic music, just pure panic. Several massive ships have been severely damaged by rogue waves. Others simply vanished without a trace. And considering that over 80% of the ocean remains largely unexplored, there's a very uncomfortable possibility. Somewhere out there, right now, one of these monsters is forming, waiting for the next unlucky ship to cross its path. Number 5. Limnic Eruptions. There are certain lakes on Earth that look completely harmless, peaceful, quiet, beautiful. The kind of place where you'd take your family for a picnic, which makes what happened at Lake Nyos in Cameroon even more horrifying. Because one night, the lake exploded. Not with water, not with lava, with gas. Deep beneath the lake, enormous amounts of carbon dioxide had been building up for centuries, completely invisible, completely silent, completely unnoticed. Then, sometime during the night in 1986, something disturbed the lake, and all of that gas erupted to the surface at once. A gigantic cloud of carbon dioxide spilled across the landscape, flowing through valleys, rolling through villages, moving silently in the darkness. People never saw it coming. Many never even woke up. The gas displaced the oxygen in the air, suffocating everything in its path. Humans, livestock, wildlife. Entire villages were found exactly where they had been moments before death, as if time itself had stopped. Over 1,700 people died. And perhaps the most terrifying part is this. The survivors reported hearing almost nothing. No explosion, no screaming, just silence. Because sometimes the deadliest thing in nature isn't what you can see, it's what you can't. Number 4. Black blizzards. Most people imagine snowstorms as beautiful. Soft snowflakes drifting from the sky. Children building snowmen. A cozy cabin somewhere in the distance. That's not a black blizzard. A black blizzard is what happens when nature decides visibility is a privilege. These storms combine hurricane-force winds with blinding snow so dense that people can no longer tell where the ground ends and the sky begins. Everything becomes white. Every direction looks identical. Up, down, left, right, gone. Entire groups of people have become disoriented and frozen to death only a few feet from safety. Some victims were later discovered within sight of their own homes. Imagine surviving the storm itself, only to die because you couldn't find your front door. During some of the worst blizzards in history, winds became so violent that livestock froze where they stood. Trains became trapped, roads disappeared beneath mountains of snow, and rescue crews often had no choice but to wait for the storm to pass, because entering it was practically suicide. Nature doesn't need monsters. Sometimes all it needs is wind and snow. Number 3. Megatsunamis. Most tsunamis are terrifying. Megatsunamis belong in a completely different category. These giants are usually triggered by massive landslides, volcanic collapses, or asteroid impacts. And unlike normal tsunamis, they can reach heights that sound completely fictional. In 1958, a massive landslide crashed into Alaska's Lituya Bay. What happened next still sounds impossible. The impact generated a wave nearly 1,720 feet tall. That's taller than the Empire State Building. For a brief moment, an entire wall of water rose higher than most skyscrapers on Earth. Trees were stripped from mountainsides. Entire forests vanished. The wave carved a visible scar into the landscape that can still be seen today. Now imagine standing on a boat and seeing that approaching. Actually don't, because there probably isn't enough therapy in the world for that image. Fortunately, events this extreme are incredibly rare, because if they weren't, coastal cities would be having a very bad time. Number 2. Supervolcanoes. A normal volcano can destroy a town. A supervolcano can change the entire planet. Beneath places like Yellowstone lies an enormous reservoir of magma, not a mountain, not a crater. An entire underground system large enough to make normal volcanoes look like campfires. When supervolcanoes erupt, They don't simply throw ash into the air. They launch thousands of cubic kilometers of material into the atmosphere. Entire continents can become covered in ash. Global temperatures can drop, crop failures can spread across the world, and ecosystems can collapse. The last major super eruption at Yellowstone occurred hundreds of thousands of years ago, which sounds reassuring, until you realize that Earth's geological clock doesn't care about human schedules. Thankfully, scientists don't believe Yellowstone is erupting anytime soon. But if it ever does, the phrase "bad day" would no longer be sufficient. Number 1. A gamma ray burst. Everything else on this list, Earth did to itself. This one isn't even from Earth. A gamma ray burst is the most powerful explosion known in the universe, released when a massive star collapses, firing 2 narrow beams of radiation into space at nearly the speed of light. Telescopes catch these happening in other galaxies almost every week. The problem is, what happens if one of those beams is pointed at us? If a star within a few thousand light years went off this way, the burst could strip away half of Earth's ozone layer in about 10 seconds. Some scientists believe this may have already happened. It's one of the leading hypotheses for the late Ordovician extinction. 440 million years ago, the second largest die-off in Earth's history. And there's one more scary thing. A gamma ray burst travels at the speed of light. There's no warning. The moment we'd see it coming is the same moment it arrives. The odds of this happening in our lifetime are astronomically low. But somewhere out there, a star that died thousands of years ago might have already fired, and the light just hasn't gotten here yet.